So if you've ever followed a Next.js tutorial, you've probably built a login form. And it works. It feels like a big win, right? But here's the question that keeps security folks up at night. Is your app actually secure? In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct what it takes to go from that simple working form to a truly production-grade authentication system that can handle real-world threats. Let's get into it. Here's our game plan. First, we're going to look way beyond the simple login form to see what real security is all about. Then, we'll break down the 3 absolute pillars of auth, expose a hidden and pretty common flaw in a lot of setups, and then we'll get into the tools. After that, we'll even look at some real-world bugs before I give you the full architect's blueprint for your next project. All right, let's kick things off with a really important idea. There is a huge difference between an app that just lets users log in and one that is genuinely secure against the kind of threats we see today. You know, it's such an easy trap to fall into. The form works, the user gets in, and we just check it off the to-do list and move on. But a working login is really just the tip of the iceberg. Real security means you have to start thinking like an attacker. You have to anticipate how they might try to get around your front door and find the weak spots in your system. So to build that kind of deep security, we really have to master 3 different but totally connected concepts. These are the absolute bedrock of any auth system you will ever build. No exceptions. First up is authentication. Sometimes you'll see it as authn. Think of this as the bouncer at the front door of your app. It's the part that challenges a user to prove who they are, whether that's with a good old-fashioned password or by using a service like Google or GitHub. It's all about confirming, yep, you are who you say you are. Okay, so once a user is authenticated and they're in the club, you need a way to remember them as they move around. That is session management. It's the system that keeps track of that logged-in state so your users don't have to put their password in every single time they click something. This is usually handled with things like secure cookies or sessions stored in a database. And finally, we have authorization, or authz. Now, if authentication is about who you are, authorization is all about what you're allowed to do. Once we know who the user is, this layer is what decides, okay, which pages can they see? What data can they actually access? What buttons can they click? Now, what's so interesting is how these pillars get implemented, which brings us to a super critical architectural principle that, frankly, a lot of tutorials and basic setups just get wrong. Most guides out there will point you towards using Next.js middleware to protect your routes. And don't get me wrong, that's a great first step. It's a really efficient way to check if a user is logged in before they even see a page. It creates a good user experience. But it's not enough. And here's why. Here's the vulnerability. Middleware only protects the route, the page URL. A smart attacker isn't going to bother with your UI. They can completely bypass the middleware and try to call your server action or your API endpoint directly. And if your only security check is at the route level, your data is wide open. This leads us to probably the single most important rule in application security. Your final definitive check can't just be at the route. It has to be at the data layer, right inside the server action or the API route itself, just milliseconds before you touch the database. That is your true last line of defense. And this gives us the dual-layer model. Think of it like a castle, right? Middleware is the big outer wall. It handles traffic, it turns away the obvious intruders, and it's great for the user experience. But the real treasure, your data, is locked away in an inner vault. And that vault needs its own guard, with a final, non-negotiable check happening right at the data source. A truly secure app has both. So with this dual-layer model in our minds, how do we actually build it? Well, that brings us to the tools of the trade. And in the Next.js world, your choice often comes down to a really key strategic decision. In the Next.js ecosystem, the decision usually boils down to these 2 giants, Auth.js, which you might know as NextAuth.js, and Clerk. And your choice here really represents a fork in the road. Are you optimizing for total control and deep flexibility? Or are you optimizing for raw development speed and managed enterprise-grade security? This table really frames the core decision perfectly. On one side, you have Auth.js. It's open source, it's free, and it gives you total flexibility, which is amazing for deep customization. On the other side, you have Clerk. Now, it's a paid service, but it's basically off in a box. It gives you beautiful, pre-built components and managed security that's just ideal for shipping a product fast. But, just choosing a tool is only the beginning. Trying to implement it in a real production environment, that brings a whole new set of challenges. the kind that tutorials almost never prepare you for. Especially when you're working with newer versions like the NextAuth at beta package that a lot of official guides recommend, developers run into these tricky real-world problems. Community forums on places like GitHub are just filled with these little edge cases that can completely stop your development if you're not ready for them. Honestly, just knowing what to look for here can save you hours of frustration. For example, a super common bug is the client session not updating after a server signout. The fix? You usually just have to call both the server and the client signout functions. Or that dreaded invalid JWE error. A lot of the time, it's just a funky cookie issue that clearing your browser cache will fix. Tapping into these community-found solutions is a real superpower. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. We've talked theory, architecture, tools, and even those painful production pitfalls. So let's put it all together into a final, actionable blueprint for building secure Next.js apps. When you boil it all down, the strategy is what matters most. First, choose the tool that actually fits your project's goals. Use modern, strong password hashing like Argon 2 ID. And please, above all else, implement that dual-layer security model. Protect your routes, but always protect your data at the source. And finally, stay plugged into the developer community. It's the absolute best way to stay ahead in the space. Ultimately, every single decision that we've talked about today really comes down to this one question. Your approach to authentication isn't just a technical choice. It's a statement about your priorities. It defines whether you're just trying to ship a feature fast or if you're truly building an application that's designed to earn and to keep your users' trust for the long haul.